Thank you for tuning in once again to his Vine and Fig Tree podcast. My name is Kurt Olson. I'm your host. I'm coming to you on the afternoon of August 19th, 2026. And more COVID stuff. Folks, there's a drip going on of information. And there were events that unfolded yesterday. We're going back to Spain, Iran, and Democrats with the DSA. Um, the first stop is David Morens. Anyone who reads my column would perhaps know this name. I have mentioned him 3 different times in recent years since it was found out that he was intentionally deleting material that was subject to Freedom of Information Act law. And yesterday, sometime in the afternoon and into the early evening, this unfolded. I'm not going to read the entire thing from the New York Post. It will be in the description to the podcast linked, and people who are so inclined can read it in its entirety there. An indicted former senior advisor to Dr. Anthony Fauci pleaded guilty to a federal conspiracy charge Tuesday, stemming from a scheme to conceal government records on coronavirus research grants from investigators probing the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. David Morens, a former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases official, copped to conspiracy to commit offenses and to defraud the United States. He faces up to 5 years. This man is 78 years old, folks. Here he is, longtime bureaucrat in the health area of the federal government. COVID-19 happens. He decides to be stupid in terms of what he was doing with records that clearly the public should have access to. And he's 78 years old. He could be in jail into his early to mid 80s by pleading guilty today. Dr. Morens has taken responsibility for what he did and will continue to do so, said his defense attorney Timothy Belevitz. As part of the plea, Morens, 78, admitted that between April 2020 and June 2023, he conspired with 2 unnamed co-conspirators and others to defraud the United States by hampering, hindering, impeding, or obstructing by craft, trickery, deceit, or dishonest means the lawful and legitimate functions of public health agencies from complying with the Freedom of Information Act and Federal Records Act, including by destroying or concealing records related to the termination and restoration of a National Institutes of Health grant for research on bat coronaviruses. Morens admitted to conducting government business through his personal Gmail account following termination of the NIH bat coronavirus research grant to intentionally hide his communications with his co-conspirators from FOIA requests and public view. This is an area of government activity that has been in my bailiwick while I was in journalism. And government officials at the local, state, and federal levels all the time are trying to either find their way around or skirt the law when it comes to public records. The harsh reality is this. As public officials, taxpayers pay their salary. And because of that, Those records deserve all the scrutiny that can possibly come their way. Now, people will also remember during the COVID pandemic, we had an awful lot of people in the media, the legacy media, uh, cable television, the major networks, and even newspaper media, not very inquisitive about what was going on with COVID, not very inquisitive about, you know, levels of pushback the American public was beginning to give people after certain things started happening. And I'm just going to briefly retell the story for me. I mean, I was kind of in the camp of, surely we're the American government and we can come up with a test that is reliable to determine if people have COVID. I was wrong. We failed at that miserably. Okay. And the last straw for me was um, George Floyd. When George Floyd was killed or died on the streets of Minneapolis, and there are people who will say he was killed by the cop. There are people who say he had drugs in his system, and they're in that camp. The harsh reality is this: we were told to isolate, do everything to avoid large crowds, you name it. And then suddenly, it was okay to gather in public in mass protest for racial justice. And when all of that happened, and you then had the rioting and looting of major cities in this country, I was lost forever. There were other things that were happening other than, oh, we're protecting the American people. And David Morens was a key advisor and person at the agency where Fauci was leader, and they were skirting the law intentionally to keep the government from finding certain information. And I'm going to take this back to one of my rules. I got a rule of government. Nothing good ever comes from the lack of transparency. And in this case, it's going to be imprisonment for Mr. Morens. And with other things now happening and a criminal referral having been made to the Department of Justice, it is very possible that Morens will be spilling the beans on others. It will be interesting to see if that happens. Who's going to be the pig that begins to squeal and squeal loud in order to save, pun intended, their own bacon? So that's the first story. The second story is just a couple of weeks ago, late July, we had 70,000 people descend on Ceuta, Spain, in northern Africa, because the president of Spain um, decided to open the border of Spain to mass migration. So 70,000 people from North Africa, Morocco specifically, come ashore. In all that chaos, there was some that died, but the mayor of Ceuta, Spain, isn't happy, and he is now challenging the government within 30 days to have a solution for this, or they're going to take other steps. It will be interesting to see where that goes. Iran. You know, everything's kind of quiet suddenly. And we're still there. And we are controlling the Strait of Hormuz. We are in a spot where we could choke the financial life out of Iran. Um, saw the data where when the protests started, $1 to the rial, which is the Iranian currency, it was 1 to 1.3 and change million. The current number is $1 to almost 2 million rials. And the Iranian economy is in tatters. And if Donald Trump really wants to leave a legacy that says, I was the guy who took out the mullahs, I was the guy who took out the Islamic regime of Iran, I was the one who made the world safer than it was 50 years ago. I'm the one who, go down the list of things that could come with that bragging. Um, that could happen. That could happen. And this could be a foreign policy legacy that makes the world a safer place. Um, Time's going to tell. Time's going to tell. But I've said it before and I will say it again. We should arm the Iranian people. They would take matters into their own hands. Last thing I want to briefly mention is we are beginning to see Democrats in forums where they're being interviewed, either on cable television, the networks, somewhere. We're beginning to see Democrats say they will not tolerate a party that is taken over by these radical communists. Because these Democrats, they are pro-America. And they don't like this direction of a country where America gets blamed for everything and it gets turned over to a bunch of people who have no desire to see the benefit of the United States at all. I'm going to leave 2 videos in the description to the podcast. One, Julian Epstein. He goes back to the Clinton era. And the other one is Mark Penn. He also goes back to the Clinton era. And both of them have very strong comments about the state of their party. And uh, I've seen other things that talk about the Senate race in Michigan, where this Abdul El Sayed is facing Mike Rogers, the Republican. And all the polling indicates how this Arab guy needs black people to vote for him very comfortably in order to be swept into the U.S. Senate. And there are blacks in Michigan, in Detroit, and other locations saying, "Don't bet on it." So it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this shakes out from New York to Colorado to Michigan to other places as the Democrats are putting their party in the hands of a bunch of raging lunatics. And I say lunatics because they don't know human nature, they don't know economics, they don't know history, and Their ideas repeatedly fail. And so it will be interesting to see what comes of all of that. That is all I have this week. Dropping a fresh column on Sunday. It's a topic that's dear to me because it involves being an informed person and the age in which we live when the media does not have a lot of credibility. And that's all I'm going to say about that. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And until next time, God bless and goodbye.